Joining me is Jim Pfaff, the president of the Conservative Caucus. You can find out more at theconservativecaucus.org, theconservativecaucus.org. Good morning, Jim.
Good morning, Gunther. How you doing?
Good. So I had asked Mario if you had any word on this. ALIPAC is saying that the SAVE Act has in it, in the bill, there's maybe some backdoor amnesty thing. Were you able to find out about that?
Well, I started looking into it and digging on the legislation just to kind of double check. You can always miss things. These bills get so crazy. But I don't see or find anything. I think the one concerning thing that they pointed out is that Mark Wayne Mullen was talking about we could have a discussion on some amnesty prior to his, and in fact, he's going to be, I think, on Capitol Hill on nomination hearing for DHS this week, today, I think. So this is really concerning to me in the sense that when you have a guy like Mark Wayne Mullen, who everybody hears him talk on television, he sounds really great, and he sounds like he's supporting the president. He just got one of the worst voting records for Republicans in Congress. I've never been much impressed with him. In fact, I was talking to a former congressman friend of mine just last week about all this and him going in there and who served with him, and he was like, yeah, the guy is a hothead and was not, he never got along well with him at all when he was in the House. So, that's maybe the bigger concern is you have someone like him. Like you have this problem of Kristi Noem, who's not all that impressive a person, but was totally dedicated to what Donald Trump wanted to do. And then you got a guy like Mark Wayne Mullen, who's kind of your typical Republican in Congress that gives lip service and may not be as dedicated to what Trump's trying to do as others. But Donald Trump's going to run the show at DHS. The question is, will members of Congress want to give in? And that's also my concern. They could sneak anything in at any time because they're just so stupid.
Yeah, but so you don't like this guy, so why are we even why do we want him? Why did Trump pick him?
We don't.
Then why did Trump pick him?
Well, why Trump picked him is because he's really, I'm guessing, I'm kind of throwing it out there. I haven't obviously talked to him, but the guy's good on television. And one thing that Kristi Noem was bad at was what she did on television. She actually wasn't all that great. And she did a lot of stupid things like, what's his name, one of the California senators, her team around her when she was doing a press conference and he went to confront her. They manhandled a U.S. senator. And she did this kind of stupid stuff. She was really bad on television.
No, she was really bad with she was really bad with John Kennedy.
Yeah, absolutely. She is really another good example of the type of person we don't want. So here's the trade-off. If Mark Wayne Mullen and Kristi Noem I'd put kind of in the same camp, although I think Kristi Noem was more dedicated to Donald Trump's policies. But the one thing that he brings that she didn't have is he actually is an effective communicator. And one example of this, although I think he's a much better individual, is Marco Rubio, who, in my estimation, he was doing a lot of the neocon stuff when he was a U.S. senator, and I was publicly very critical of it. But the guy has towed the line 100% for Donald Trump because he knows that his responsibility is to carry forward what Donald Trump's agenda is. If Mark Wayne Mullen fits that, then having a better spokesman is not a bad trade-off. But I don't trust a lot of these people in Congress. I work around them. They're snakes. And the weak part of the Trump agenda is Republicans in Congress, as I've told you many times.
Yeah, we've all
and we're seeing this play out right now.
Yeah, we've talked about that many times. So then there was this story going around that Schumer was now going to change his mind on the SAVE Act, but that story disappeared. That's the SAVE. There's the amnesty's in the SAVE Act, but that's stalled, and of course the whole discussion on refunding DHS is stalled. How do you see those playing out?
Well, if Chuck Schumer. There might be Democrats who come over and vote for it, like John Fetterman is, and you might find some others. He's the only maybe halfway rational one, although his voting record sucks. But you may see a few come off to the side and vote for the SAVE Act. If Chuck Schumer's one of them, you got a better than 80% chance that something bad happened to the bill. And that's what you need to be careful of.
Right.
Listen, all we need are 51 senators to pass this thing. And that is absolutely doable if you get through the actual filibuster process, which honestly, Mike Lee is doing a good job of halfway negotiating. Like, Thune's not likely to do it. And we still have a less than 50% chance of the bill passing, but we have a chance. And it seems to be playing out okay right now because Thune has agreed not to throw it up to a cloture show vote to say we've got Democrats on the record. I could give a flip whether Democrats are on the record one way or the other. They're already on the record. That's not what we need. We got to pass the dang bill because it's an existential situation for our country. We are doing elections right now like we've never done them in history over the last 15 years. We got to go back to the way we were doing them. And the Save America Act gets us almost all the way there.
Except the problem is that people, you have to have, the whole thing is to have an ID to vote. Well, they're giving IDs in many states to illegal immigrants.
Well, so keep in mind, it's not just an ID to vote. That's not what the Save America Act says. You have to prove citizenship as well, too. Many people might have seen this exchange between Dick Durbin and Mike Lee that happened either last week or the week before, and it's been making the rounds recently. Dick Durbin is saying, it's not right because people have to go get a passport, and that's $180, and then you got to wait 2 weeks. And Mike Lee rightly made the point, this is one of the provisions of the bill. You have to prove citizenship, but you can do an affidavit attestation and then have it a legal requirement under penalty of law for the state to go verify it because they've already got all the birth documents, for example. And they have reciprocity with other states, they can go get the birth certificate of a different state if someone's trying to register to vote in the state they're in, but were born in a different state. The reality is it is not at all difficult to prove you're an American citizen, and it is a requirement. Now, keep in mind, and one of the things I think it requires for ID is that you have to use real ID, which does require proof of citizenship. So
and by the way, everybody's got to have real ID. Everybody. I had to go get real ID if I wanted to fly, even within the United States.
Right.
I had to have real ID, and you had to have your birth certificate and your Social Security and your income tax and a utility bill or something, and all this stuff. And by the way, I thought I had my real Social Security card because it was the one they mailed me when I was 12 years old, and that wasn't the real one. So bottom line is, I had to go back and I had to go to the Social Security office and get, quote unquote, a real Social Security card and then go back. So it was a pain in the butt. But guess what? I had to do it. I'm an American citizen. Why shouldn't everybody have to do it?
Well, and Bobby, you got to understand, everybody was doing this for our entire history. This was one of the big lies that Democrats have been foisting upon the American people for a couple decades now, because where we've gotten in our elections was their intent. They couldn't win elections in the 90s and the early 2000s, and so they wanted to change the game in their favor. The reality is everybody had to go through this for our entire history, and everybody could do this. You've got months and months to prepare to go vote and even to register to vote prior to any election. Plus, you need all of these things for your normal life anyway. You do. It's not insane if you're going to use a credit card in the store for the people in the store to say, "Can I see your ID?" to make sure that that's you. Now, that's not perfect verification for the card, but it is a perfect verification of you. And that is a rational thing to do in a society. And so this is not rocket science. And people who are too lazy to do that, really, honestly, they didn't want to vote anyway. What's happening is that with unsolicited mail ballots, dirty voter rolls, Democrats have decided, because of vote gathering, because of other methodologies, to go ahead and get people who otherwise could never end up voting to vote for them. And when you talk about actual vote gathering, which is unlimited in California, it's limited in other states like Colorado, but it can be done. Now you're getting into a place where you're doing electioneering in front of someone. So the combination of requiring only citizens to be able to vote and getting rid of unsolicited mail voting, and clean voter rolls, you've gotten rid of almost all the problems in our elections. There's still more to do, but that is a big thing that we've got to overcome, because the only reason Democrats do well enough in elections is not because of any issues they talk about. It's entirely because of massaging the voter system to work for them and to bring people into the system who should not be there. Because that is entirely the game, because they want to transform America and get rid of the American Republic. That is their goal. They are an un-American party, and the only way they win is bad election process, period.
Aaron, to me, when you look at all the Republicans now that have stepped down, not seeking re-election, an incumbent, even though there'll be tight races and they're going to be targeting them, Republican incumbents face a tough row to hoe as it is, but now you're going to be having a non-incumbent Republican trying to recapture a Republican seat. That's a problem. Then you add into it the fact that I think that the Chinese are doing a great psyops war on Republicans, and they've got the Masseys and Marjorie Taylor Greenes and Tucker Carlson's having battle within the Republican Party with the people that are still loyal to Trump, although it shows that the polls show he's at the highest favorability for a second-term president amongst his own party at 86%, when Bush and Obama in their second terms were at 77% each, and Trump's still holding 86%. But we're dividing and conquering within our own party. We've got a lot of Republicans not seeking re-election, and right now the Democrats rooting for Iran against us. They want to see oil prices go up. They want to see this, and I feel like then you add that we still haven't solved it with the SAVE Act, the voting integrity. You still have money laundering going on with all these NGOs and all this, some of the stuff like the Somali garbage. All of that, we got a big problem in midterms, a huge problem. I think we're going to get. I think we're getting our heads handed on a plate. I'm not optimistic at all.
If the vote happened today, we'd get shellacked.
Yeah.
I mean, that's just the way it is right now. There would be a disaster. It can be turned around, but we got to remember, every one of us, that getting Donald Trump elected was a massive benefit. You know, we're already on a $2 trillion deficit trajectory this year, but it has nothing to do with Donald Trump. It's all because Republicans in Congress continue the spending levels that they've always kept us on. You know, they haven't made any radical changes in that at all, only a slight one as it came to Medicaid and the One Big Beautiful Bill. But it was modest. Donald Trump, though, as far as he is able to as president, has cut a lot of spending, has reformed a lot of what government is doing, has reduced regulation, which is allowing growth in the economy. So that $2 trillion deficit we're on a track for would be much worse. But we're in this situation in part for various factors, but the one I've talked about with voting is one of them, with what Democrats have set up. But honestly, we have been allowing these people to get reelected. We have to do our job to make sure we tell our friends to vote. I'm not saying anyone listening to this broadcast has done anything wrong. I'm saying you could do more. You need to get the people who care like you do to actually show up at the polls, because that's really important. And that has benefited Pennsylvania. In 2024, it benefited Pennsylvania in a pretty dramatic way. We have to argue that. But these open seats are not just a negative thing. They're also an opportunity if we're willing to undertake it. Most primaries have not taken place around the country, and people need to look at who those candidates are. We're going to be talking about it at the Conservative Caucus, of course, and trying to inform people. But that's the opportunity. It's a potential negative, but it's also an opportunity. The dynamics of the R&D balance in various congressional seats typically works the right way. We have people, 90% of people who try to get reelected to Congress. So while that one member is gone, the dynamics still work because people do tend to vote the way they are. the way they typically do. So we need to work that at the polling station. But the biggest issue is this. We need to continue the pressure on Congress where it's at right now. John Thune was going to file for cloture, as it's called. In other words, go to the 60 vote, have the show vote, let Democrats, quote unquote, be on record. That was happening. It was going to happen today. And because of the pressure people put on Thune and really called him out on it over the last few weeks, now there's a chance that Save America Act thing can get extended. That's still on that track right now, and we still have a way to work that. Momentum in politics is as important as the present state of politics. So though we would lose big in Congress if the election were held today, that momentum can change over time. And so we got to not lose heart and keep working forward while, as you do so very well, calling out the potential problems. And this potential amnesty that Mark Wayne Mullen's talking about is something we have to call out and put the pressure on Donald Trump not to allow that as well. I think if he gets the pressure, he won't allow.
The left is way more energized than us at this point in time, but we got to realize the Supreme Court's on the line, another impeachment's on the line, immigration's on the line. We've got a midterm, and President Trump's presidency's on the line in the midterms, and we better get energized. Jim Pfaff, Conservative Caucus, theconservativecaucus.org. Thank you, Jim.
Thanks so much, Bobby.